All right, I'm watching all the numbers tick up. We'll let the latecomers roll in as they please. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this month's community update. I am really excited to be back. End of the summer. I'm hoping everyone's still here. The vacation starts to die down. Everyone gets back to work. A lot of stuff to cover today. I'm excited about our guest for a couple of reasons. For the first, I do these surveys at the end, and a lot of the times, I shouldn't say a lot of times, but I've definitely seen a consistent question about Node.js and Bazel. Looking for examples, looking to ask questions, things like that. So I'm really excited to have Alex here to talk about that. I'm excited about Alex here, generally speaking, because he's a fairly prominent member of the community. So I'm really glad to give him a voice, give him a chance to talk to everyone. I'm sure you'll end up seeing him at BazelCon for those of you who come out. I do have his slides that I'm going to share out and go let him do his own introduction. Before I get into that, let's talk a few quick announcements. We've done a site redesign. Just went live 2 days ago. So we've got some new graphics. We have an entirely new nav set up. First and foremost, if you bump into any problems, any broken links or anything like that, let me know. Definitely want to get those fixed. I think we've shaken out most of them, but of course, as I say that, people have stumbled across 3 in the time that I've been talking. It's the next step in our documentation rework. I want to celebrate it. It was a lot of hard work. It looks really slick. But at the end of the day, let's be honest, content is what most people are interested in. So this is the next step. The new site nav should hopefully help people find stuff that was kind of sporadically thrown together in the past and maybe not the best organized. The new redesign looks great. And then also coming in the future, we've been working on a roadmap that is very close to being public and being placed on the website. The other thing that I've been working on is our tutorial content and trying to come up with a plan for fleshing that out to be considerably more robust than it is today, cover a lot of the different rule sets. And I want to make it available for the community to contribute. And that's an answer that I still don't completely have. So keep an eye out for the next couple of weeks. I will likely be reaching out with some updates and some questions on, hey, what do y'all think is the best way of doing this? I'll probably bring this to the rules SIG as well, because I think they're a good candidate to have some ideas on the best place to host it and the best kind of mechanisms for, hey, this is how we can have the community contribute and maintain these. Rules SIG is a good intro because Alex is going to at the very least talk about that during his introduction. To keep going, the BCR, the Bazel Central Registry, has a website now, a very neat little front end that we've got on the Bazel build DNS site. I didn't intentionally take the screenshot that showed updated 24 hours ago, but that is really awesome to show that, yes, this is seeing pretty active build up. If you don't know what the BCR is, it's related to Bazel mod. And if you don't know what that is, go back and check out the community update from 2 months ago, where I had 2 of the Google engineers on and talking about that. BazelCon, the CFP is still coming, hopefully very soon. I'll be honest, y'all, legal is difficult. Trying to go through my first time in Google, trying to figure out, hey, I need to ask names and emails and companies, and then figuring out that process is slowing things down. So as much as I wanted to have that out by now, I'm ready to go. I just need to cross off all the T's and everything like that and make sure everything's fine. So keep an eye out. I'm hoping soon, whatever that means. It would be nice if I can get this started next week. Obviously, continue to think about your talks. If you have any questions or if you want any help, the team is available. So feel free to reach out on Slack. You can either ping me directly or just reach out in general. And there are a bunch of the engineers who are interested in working with you. If you have, hey, I have a vague idea for a talk, but I'm not completely sure how to flesh it out, definitely willing to work with y'all on that. And then our next update, which I have not fully updated this slide. The September community update will be September 15th. I'm almost positive I have the speaker for that. Looking to cover the IntelliJ plugin. I'd like to do a demo and get people on board with that, because one thing I'm noticing is there's a fair amount of new users on these community updates who really haven't seen a lot of this and played a lot with this stuff yet. So that is, we've recently announced our partnership with JetBrains to hand over and have them doing a lot more contributions and maintenance of it. It's obviously something we're very, very interesting, Jonathan, about that font thing. I will take that back to the team because that's unfortunate. Could you let me know your browser and version and things like that and OS? Community updates. So I'd like to talk about IntelliJ for that one. I'm almost positive I have the speaker lined up. Also, on that new site, if you go under community, you will see a link for community updates, assuming your fonts actually load, in which case you won't see anything, just a picture. If you take a look at that, I have all the links to the previous ones, and I will be updating it with the schedule for the upcoming ones. I thought I submitted that PR. Apparently, I messed up something there. That's all for announcements. The one thing I do want to mention is I'm going to paste the form link now and then a few more times over the course of the stream. I know every stream, I'm like, hey, there's a quick little 30-second survey. This one, I'm arguably more interested in than others because the first question on there is what rule sets are people interested? And that was a very intentionally vague question. Is interested as in, hey, I want to use more, or we're actively using it and things like that. I'm just trying to gauge interest because one thing with an open source community, it's a little difficult to figure out what people are actually using Bazel for and which rule sets. Rule sets in particular are difficult when they come from different repos and they're effectively add-ons. On top of that, we don't have telemetry yet inside of Bazel to gauge this. So we are doing what we can to get an idea for that. Personally, that's going to help me as I prioritize the tutorials and understand, hey, this is the kind of content people want to see stuff about, help you get new speakers for the rest of the year and then going into next year. So don't be surprised if I spam that a little more than usual. 30 seconds is literally 3 questions and effectively optional. But again, as usual, you're not here to see me. You are here to see our speaker. So I'm going to bring Alex up, ask you to do your introduction. Specifically, I'd like you to do a quick little plug for the rules SIG. We can talk a little bit more. I can post some links to how to become part of that and how to join. But I will bring him up now and disappear myself. So take it away, Alex.
Cool. Thank you, Jason. It's awesome to be here with all my Bazel friends. Hey, everybody. Good morning. Let's see. I need to share some slides. Although I guess first I can say what Jason just asked for. So the rules authors SIG, I encourage anybody who's interested to come check us out. I'll put a link at the end of the slide deck. This is basically a way for all the different consulting companies and rules authors and big enterprises that have released rule sets to work together and solve some common problems. Bazel mod is one of the big areas where we've been active lately. So the registry.bazel.build site you saw was built by one of the contributors in the rules authors SIG. We also have a little bit of funding through Open Collective. So we're trying to find a way to get people who are motivated by money or whose employers allow them to make a little bit of extra money on the side so that they have a way to be recognized for work that they're doing in the community. Cool. All right. So let me share some slides. I'm going to try not to speak for too long and leave a lot of time for questions because I'm not really sure what you all want to hear, but I'm going to do my best to make a guess. So yeah, we're here to talk about JavaScript. I think my prompt here generally from Jason was, hey, people want to know how to use Node or see some examples. So to motivate it, we all believe Bazel's the most scalable polyglot build system, handles all the languages, and then you go look at the state of the Octaverse from GitHub, and JavaScript has been the top forever, and TypeScript has come up to number 4. TypeScript is just a way to add type information to JavaScript. You can kind of imagine it didn't have to be a separate language. It's just the way it worked out. Python, of course, has been gaining type information too. So since those are the most popular languages, we've been working for several years to make them really good under Bazel. Intro about myself. I worked at Google for a long time. Was on the Google CI system called TAP and the build results UI called Sponge. And I also was the lead for Angular CLI for a while, which is kind of where this rules Node.js stuff came from. And started this rules authors SIG. I'm also a maintainer of rules Node.js and rules Python. I was a maintainer of rules Docker. I had to drop off from that one. And there's my Twitter. Try to post relevant Bazel stuff pretty frequently. And then I also have to make a plug for my company. So after leaving Google, I wanted to make everybody else successful using Bazel. So Aspect is my consulting company trying to help make Bazel the industry standard full stack build system. So we've got support in consulting. We have a number of companies we're helping them migrate and fix up their Bazel problems. And then we're also building some products under aspect.build, which is a separate brand for product. And go check out our GitHub. Rules.js, which I'll talk about today, is one part of our ecosystem. We have a lot of other stuff in our GitHub that's useful. So one other thing to motivate the discussion. So if you come from JavaScript, you already know that the ecosystem there has this interesting way that things have evolved. And it's very different from most other ecosystems. So there were these build systems called Gulp and Grunt, which were kind of task runners, similar to Bazel. They could orchestrate things. You would give them plugins. They would call one tool, then another tool. And they both kind of weren't very good. And really what framework developers wanted to do was to shrink wrap everything and make it like really one step. JavaScript obviously has a lot of novice, entry-level developers using it. So it makes sense that you want to give them a really simple model for how to run their builds. So basically each tool became its own build system. From what I can tell, it seems like mostly accidentally, each tool became its own build system. So now every tool needs to have a plugin for every language. So you can think of it like a matrix versus a hub and spoke model. So in a matrix model, like every column is a different technology, CSS preprocessors. We're not just talking JavaScript, but to build a website, you usually have HTML assets, and you could be there are like content policies that go on the page. So there's a lot of technologies, and then the rows you can imagine being different build tools, not just bundlers, which is what people think of as building their site, but also test runners show up in that list. So I gave a talk about this. You can check it out if you're more interested. But basically, what we need is the hub and spoke model, and Bazel would be a great thing to put in the middle now that nobody wants to use Gulp or Grunt anymore. So our hope is that, really big picture, the JavaScript ecosystem could actually benefit a lot from using Bazel. And if we can make it really good, then maybe they'll use it. In case you don't know about Node, it's basically a way to run JavaScript that's not in the browser. It's been around for a long time. Not only is, and it's typically used for the tools that we run. So most of the, build systems are calling tools that are written in JavaScript. And so they need to run in Node. Worth pointing out that Node is not the only one. There's a newer one called Deno, which is attractive in a lot of ways and has some momentum behind it. There is a rules Deno. Not going to talk about that today. Rules Node.js, I started 5 years ago, maybe, basically forked from what we did at Google, where I was helping to roll out TypeScript inside Google. It has the tool chain for a hermetic Node.js interpreter, like you would expect. And it has some shared providers in it that allow for interop. And then Rules.js is basically a rethink of a lot of stuff. I'll talk about the layering, but basically it's a layer on top of Rules Node.js. It's not a complete replacement, although it's mostly a replacement. I gave a separate talk about that at Bazel Exchange a couple months ago, so you can check that out. And then JavaScript has a lot of different package managers. Again, coming from other languages, this might be surprising. In a lot of languages, there's really one and everybody's standardized around it. But in JavaScript land, there's 3 or 4, depending on whether you count Yarn PNP as being a separate one. pnpm is one of these, and it so happens to be optimized exactly for what Bazel needs. I'll talk a little bit about that. There's a similar monorepo build tool called Rush.js, which used at pnpm, and basically co-maintainers and I went and chatted with one of the people who works in that project and learned what a great fit it is. Obviously, JavaScript can run both on the client and the server. The client runtime is browsers, and the server runtime is usually Node, although Deno is an option now. They both use V8 under the covers, but the standard library is different. So you imagine this is one of the big selling points of JavaScript, is a developer can be full stack and still work in a single language. So Rules Node.js supports both, although it's kind of confusing because it has Node in the name. So it's, it sounds like it would be for the server, plus it sounds like it would not include Deno. Rules.js also supports both. This is probably the most important slide, and it's also just as of last week that I made this announcement. So everything that's a blue box here is maintained by Aspect, basically me and coworkers. Everything that's a shaded grayed out box is currently not maintained anymore. The structure here is, I mean, I don't want to have to read through the whole slide, but basically, you know, the stuff in the Aspect build GitHub org is our new stuff with rules.js. We also have a base layer called Bazel, which is mostly stuff that we just couldn't get into skylib, which is the, you know, the base, the sort of Bazel standard library that most rule sets are using. We're iterating really fast on Bazel. So if you're writing any rules, I encourage you to look in there. It also has a lot of macros that are useful for end users. So all of that stuff depends on rules Node.js, which is still maintained in the Bazel build org. And then the stuff we're throwing away, or at least like we're not going to spend time on anymore, is the layer for doing yarn install, all the Node.js rules, and the custom packages that are on npm, which is how you get some of the custom rules. But all those things are still available in the new ecosystem. So we're trying our best not to fork the world and do the right thing. But on the other hand, like this is over the last year, we've been working on this major rewrite. And I think it's worth it. It's a lot faster and more compatible. I'll talk about that. OK, so basically, architecturally, why did we spend the last year rewriting this thing? There's two main parts. The first one is how do you fetch and install npm packages, which is basically, you know, if you're a rule set author, you like run repository rules, which is the non-hermetic thing at the beginning of the build that goes and downloads and puts stuff on the disk. So if you're not using Bazel, you just run npm install or yarn install. And the behavior of that thing is it just gives you everything for the whole workspace, like everything that anything depends on. And it doesn't have any fine-grained dependency management system. And any script, if it does a require statement, can resolve to any package that you've installed. So at Google, when we did this under Bazel, which was actually a little bit before my time, Mark Trossler and a few others like wired up the Node.js layer, Vue.js. The answer was, okay, well, Google always vendors everything because it didn't have the concept of repository rules. That's not part of Blaze. So everything's in version control. So you don't really have to do any fetches, and the packages are just laid out on the disk. And basically, engineers are manual package managers. So you could do that too in your repo. I don't know anybody who wants to. So when we did rules Node.js 4 years ago or whatever, it was basically just wrap that thing as a repository rule. The thing that the idiomatic thing that the people in the npm ecosystem are doing. So you just wrap yarn install or npm install, you run it. Not good because anytime that repository rule invalidates, say you just change a comment in your package JSON file, which describes the dependencies, then that's repo rule is going to invalidate and run again from scratch. And you're kind of counting on npm or yarn to have some cache somewhere on your machine that it references, so it doesn't actually re-download everything, but they're still really slow to lay things out on the disk again. Also, there's eager fetches here. So the user has a load statement in their build file that transitively loads from something that asks for at npm/something. And so you end up installing all of these node modules, even for builds where like you're a developer who's not doing anything with JavaScript, like you're building a Python target and you see all these things fetch, which is really no good. So the ideal solution, we think, is take pnpm, which is that package manager I mentioned earlier, and port it to Starlark. So a little bit of detail, what does that mean? So there's a resolver step in every one of these languages. The resolver is, you know, take the lock file and figure out exactly which things to, take the description of the packages and figure out exactly which version of everything to download. We do that before Bazel. We assume that you're going to run the resolver and create a lock file and check in the lock file. Similar to rules Python, where we encourage people to have compiled pip requirements. It's a little bit like Java, where you can repin, and then it uses the pinned Maven. So then once we have the resolved, then we can use Bazel's downloader to do the fetches. Bazel downloader is pretty great at, has a lot of configurability. It's actually been contributed to a fair amount by the community. I think Simon Stewart and others have added features there that are great for, like, you know, working behind a corporate firewall and stuff. Then Bazel does the unpack of the tarballs, just basically, you know, similar to HTTP archive. Then we have to do post-install actions. So npm packages assume that they can run rando stuff when they come down to your disk. So we just reused there's a lifecycle package underneath pnpm that we can still call. But those are actions and not repository rules. So this is great. This means that the post-install stuff is remote cacheable and doesn't get rerun when the repository rule invalidates. Then the last step is that the result of installing npm packages is a folder called node modules, and we have to link that. Don't really have time to get into details on that part. You can look at some benchmarks here. This is basically super duper fast, even in the case that you fetch everything. But in the happy path, you fetch very few packages, and you don't even have to install all of them. So Bazel is actually faster than anything else out there because nobody else has a fine-grained dependency graph that allows them to know which packages they actually need to fetch. Everybody else has to fetch 100% of them. So thanks to fine-grained dependencies, Bazel can actually win at this. And this is that happy path. So if you only needed one package, you would only install one package. So every both yarn npm, pnpm coming from the ecosystem take, over 25 seconds. And then yarn install and npm install are the two rules from rules Node.js, which can only be slower, like you're adding Bazel on top of running those tools. But then the new one, npm translate lock, is where the speed up is. Okay, so the second half.
You know what? Actually, this is probably a good time. I wish I caught you during the deep breath. Let me go over a few questions in chat, if that's cool with you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for interrupting.
Yeah, no, first, it's not actually a question. I just wanted to, I love highlighting the praises that the community says during these streams. So someone's using Vue.js, very appreciative. It's got a bunch of follow-up questions. I will let you read this, and it's pinned to the screen, so reading it out loud is not going to do anyone any favors. I will say the follow-up question is, are there any plans to have a Gazelle extension for it?
Yes, Gazelle extension is in the roadmap. So the thing you have pinned, I can only see up through the parentheses 2.
That's actually where it cuts off. And then
okay.
The continued is do you have any plans to do
okay, got
Gazelle
it.
extension?
Yeah, so to get the benefit, like to move to file level imports instead of package imports. I think what this is saying is the dependency graph could be finer grained so that, and the answer to this is you can do it both ways, if I'm understanding the question correctly, which is that you can either model your dependency graph as npm packages, which is sort of the idiomatic way, and you would do it in the npm ecosystem. But you can also do it in the Bazel idiomatic way, and it's just that there's a little bit more syntax to put in your build files to describe how to link the packages together. I think that's right.
Okay. I'll keep an eye if there's any kind of follow-ups to that. Second question. This one also does not cut off. That's where it ends at the 2, so you're not missing anything.
Yeah, so there was a feature in Bazel that we actually asked for near the beginning of Rules Node.js called manage directories. And this is a thing you actually stuck on the workspace call. At the very top of your workspace file, you call a function called workspace, and you tell the name of your workspace. And we added a second attribute there, which was manage directories, which is this concept that like Bazel would fetch an external repository and put it in the usual external folder. But at the same time, it would symlink it into your project so that you would appear to be part of the source tree at the same time, which was basically a solution for the second half of this question. Like we have to, run the npm install command again in the source tree. That thing had bugs. The Bazel team didn't want to have to carry it forward. And so I worked with Lukasz on that. And our determination was that it wasn't worth the bugs that like very subtle bugs in Bazel. Like Bazel doesn't notice if you make edits under this folder. You could sometimes have to do a Bazel clean -- expunge to get it to fix these bugs, which is like nobody should ever learn that command exists. So yeah, if you want to have tools outside of Bazel still run, then you just have to install the dependencies in a place that those tools know to look for them. Yeah.
All right, next up. This is awesome. I'll keep the questions coming. This is fantastic. Worst case, if we end up spending a ton of time on questions, we can either have Alex back to continue his slides. I'm sure there'll be plenty of other opportunities to have Alex on. So keep the questions coming. I absolutely love this. Next question up there, Alex.
Yeah, HMR is hot module reloading. For those who don't know, it's basically a trick to tell the runtime to hot swap in some code, but not like replace the contents of what's in memory. So it's sort of like, there's some JVMs that can hot swap, and it's a faster developer round trip. In theory, it's a lie because it means that the new code is now running and seeing objects that were created by the old code. And in theory, like you have to design your application in such a way that it's robust to the kind of like weird version skew things that happen. In practice, a lot of people do this for web to make it faster. So yeah, you use iBazel, which is the Bazel watch mode. And to get HMR working across deps, change in component lib to show up in the app without rebuilding. I don't have any great answers for this. HMR has always been one of the hardest things for us to get right because it kind of assumes that the build system and the runtime are working together. So, you know, under Bazel, Bazel's job is just to update the Bazel out tree all the time, and that's what iBazel does. Then the development server needs to know to look there and push the updates. I think the simple answer here is to just be less Bazel-ish and run Webpack Dev Server. We do have a rules Webpack that has a iBazel aware wrapper or plugin for the Webpack Dev Server, so that changes in the Bazel out tree should show up, and it shouldn't break HMR. Like the Webpack Dev Server should still be able to do it, is my understanding.
Okay, next one. This one's actually two parts. So the question is in the next one.
Right. Okay. So this is saying, like Bazel can skip installing stuff, but most users are going to run it pnpm install, and so they're still going to install 100% of things. That's true. So it's a similar question about that managed directories feature that we're taking out from Bazel. My theory for this is that package.json lets you express two kinds of dependencies. There's dev dependencies and regular dependencies you can think of as production dependencies. And all the package managers have a flag to allow you to install only one of those two sets. So I think in theory, the stuff you need in your project is really just like, assuming you're using TypeScript, you need TypeScript to do type checking and maybe a couple other packages that your editor needs to exist. All the rest of it, the editor shouldn't need to exist because you're going to use Bazel for all of those workflows. So in theory, you can just install the one package you need, or you can install just the dev dependencies and not the prod dependencies. And if you were to split up your package JSON in a way that, like the ones that you need outside of Bazel are in one group, I think that's an answer here. I don't know that I've seen anybody do that successfully, though.
Okay. To all of you, if you have follow-up questions or anything wasn't clear there, or I didn't fully represent your question, by all means, keep posting. Those of you who haven't asked questions, if you have them, I can't express this enough. I'm more than happy to do this as just kind of a question and answer. I made a joke about if you make Alex sweat, it's bonus points, but damn, you are on top of this. And yeah, it's going to be tricky, man. You really know your shit when it comes to this. All right, that's the end of the questions for now. So I will let you keep going and disappear again. Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, I know we have 15 minutes left on the clock, so I'm going to try to not talk as much for this part. So the previous slides here were about installing packages. So then the next thing you need is, okay, we're running the program and it wants to locate those packages. And Bazel insists on putting stuff in this weird location in the output tree under the /external/ wherever the repository rule ran. So how is Node going to find stuff there? So I'll step through the same things basically. So if you're not using Bazel, the answer is you have to have a node modules folder, and it has to be in your source tree, and every require statement, it has to resolve that relative to the location of the requiring script. So you have a require in your code, then the node modules directory has to be in your source tree. Deno actually doesn't have that problem, but you know that's a big change to swap the whole runtime out to fix that. So what we did at Google was to patch the require function. So go all the way down into the node runtime and figure out the places that it knows where to resolve stuff on disk and change them. We're not the only ones who came up with that idea. So there's this something called plug and play, which is a new strategy that a couple of package managers are experimenting with, like Yarn PNP. The problem that we have at Google and that Yarn PNP has is that it's not compatible because so many things in the ecosystem have accidentally hard-coded a dependency on this node modules directory to exist where it does. So, you know, good luck going and changing, you know, JavaScript's been the most popular language for 10 years. Good luck going and finding all the places that people made that assumption and fixing them. So that's really no good. Rules Node.js brought in a concept of a linker. So npm itself has a link command. So it's similar to a linker in any other language. It's basically take all the compiled bits and make it so that they can resolve each other. So that's not great because we had to do it at the beginning of every spawn of Node.js, which means that these links can appear in your outside of the sandbox, and it means it doesn't work with gen rule, and it's not compatible with persistent workers. And it was a nice try. We've rewritten it completely in rules.js, and now we finally figured it out, I think. It's just a standard Bazel target. So if you build the node modules target, then it will link in the sense that it will just lay out a tree under Bazel bin. Like the output folder is now going to contain the node modules tree. Now that's a little weird because, like I said, Node assumes that the working directory has to have both the sources and the node modules and anything generated. So the weird trick we do this time is we have to copy all the sources to Bazel bin also, and all the actions run from Bazel bin, or in the output tree. So that's very different from anything else you'll see in Bazel. We think it's worth it because now everything in Node works properly. So as long as we can make sure Bazel puts everything in the output tree before it runs an action, we no longer have all this weird stuff. Solves a bunch of problems. Yeah, okay. So I wanted to go through some examples, but Jason, maybe I should pause again here for any questions that have popped up. No. 0. Okay. Cool. So there's basically, I'll try to show these 6 things. I don't know if there's really time to show all of them, but I'll just step through what this looks like in code, basically. So this example is a Vue.js app. So this is going to be a front-end app. Basically illustrates all the stuff I just talked about. But hopefully I'll give you just enough information about how to locate these things in the source tree to understand how it's put together.
Sorry about that. I answered you forgetting that just because my camera was off, I was not in the stage. You couldn't hear anything. I do have one quick one that came up.
Possible to run npm link package where the package is defined. So not quite. So the idea with linking is that you want the node modules tree to appear in the folder where the thing is used, right? Because the resolution algorithm is from the site where the require statement appears, resolve to the package. And so you really want the linking operation should be at the use site, not at the declaration site.
I think this is a follow-up to clarify what he was asking there.
Yeah, I'm probably not understanding the question in enough detail. Also, like this npm link all packages. I'll show that thing in a second. I think for this talk, I want to try to keep it at the simpler level. I don't think I really have time to get into details about instead of where the node modules directory is defined. Yeah, I think I think I answered it. I hope I answered it.
He does follow up. I say, got it, thanks. Okay. Obviously, to everyone, any follow-up questions, Alex is very vocal and very active in Slack, so you can feel free to follow up there. Ultimately did come back and they said, sure, you answered my question. And another one from Matthew.
What support for compiling native packages? Matthew, what a good question. Like I said, the post install is now run as actions. So this gives us a new capability, which is to know the target platform, which means that we should be able to compile native packages for the target platform. Imagine you're like shipping your app into a Docker container. The real answer to this is you stumped me. I don't know to what extent this already works, but it's on the roadmap to do cross compilation. Like if the target platform is the same as the host platform, I think it will already work in the sense that the node, the pnpm install will fall through to a C++ toolchain that's on your machine. It's certainly not hermetic, but it might work. That's just proof I didn't plant that question.
And I like it. And once again, I was muted. I am so off today. We're good on questions. You can keep going with the examples.
Okay. Actually, I decided before looking at the example, let me just show the wrap-up slides. So rules.js 1.0 is out. It's missing RBE support. That's because the pnpm package layout has to have symlinks in order for things to resolve at runtime. And the the RBE protocol always resolves symlinks into standard files before shipping them over the wire to the remote executor. We have an awesome contributor, Fabian, in the community who's been sending PRs against Bazel for this, but as usual, it's hard to get enough Googler time to review those things and get them in. I'm hoping that gets in for Bazel 6. And then the Gazelle extension, like you mentioned, or like somebody asked, yeah, we're working on that. And then we've been pretty active working on Bazel mod. You can use rules.js with Bazel mod. It's just that you have to declare a bunch more dependencies than you want to. Just a Bazel mod restriction, but I know that we're working on that. And I think Fabian got stuff working in rules Go in a way that's better. So anyway, by the time Bazel 6 comes out, we intend to have Bazel mod support looking in the right shape. And I also wanted to put this up here. So like Jason said, I'm happy to answer more questions on Bazel Slack like usual. But we also set up this Calendly so you can come and ask questions sort of in person if using your voice and is what you prefer. So we have this every week. Basically, if people sign up for it, then it will pop up on our calendars. Okay, so hopefully it's useful for me to step through some code. So any NPM project has this package JSON file. So this is where the dependencies and the dev dependencies show up. Like I said, the first step is we need somebody to resolve these. Like Bazel can't just consume this because it has like semver ranges in it. So like we don't know exactly which version. We don't have the integrity hashes, so we can't tell the Bazel downloader what to do. So we assume that you will have created a lock file. You can actually, you don't have to have a pnpm lock file. If you have a yarn lock or an npm package lock file, rules.js can read those, and we'll just run pnpm import on the fly inside the repository rule to translate it into one of these pnpm lock files. This one has basically like the root is a package, and so it's resolved everything to specific. Well, this tells you what the person requested, and then subdirectories can have their own separate transitive closures of dependencies. And then this thing has all these integrity hashes that Bazel's going to need. So once we have this YAML file, we can convert it into Starlark, and now we have everything we need to download packages. Great. So if you look at what happens in the workspace file, fetch rules.js. Rules.js depends on rules Node.js, like I mentioned earlier. So that means we can load and register our tool chains. This is the same as, hopefully this layer is common between anybody's JavaScript rules. Then we translate that lock file. Notice you can put patches here like any good repository rule. The world is never quite right Bazel shaped. And so if you have to get somebody's patch, you can. This creates a repo called npm, which is only lazy fetched. When we call this npm repositories rule, kind of similar to pip parse, this again doesn't do any fetches. This is just creating rules, but until they're referenced somewhere in your load statements, nothing will get fetched. And then rules rollup is just one example of, the probably 8 or so tools that we've built custom rules for. Although you don't need custom rules, I'll show in a second. There's no custom rules here for Vite, which is the build system that Vue uses, and yet we can use it anyway. So here's what that looks like. Similar to rules Node.js, we make these convenience targets. So you can imagine Vite itself has a package JSON file which declares some binaries that it exposes. So you can load those directly, and Vue.tsc is their TypeScript type checker. You can just load those, and then you can call them, and no custom rules are required. So this is like fancy magic gen rule, basically. There's no this calls under the hood if you look at like a Bazel query. This is a run.js binary target, or JS run binary, sorry. So this is basically all you need in your build file. This is obviously running the legacy build system inside of Bazel. So like we've chosen to keep using Vite. Vite is written in Go. It's super fast. It turns out that if you iBazel run this target to like host the app, and then you look at it in your browser, and then you make a code change, it's like 1/3 of a second for the code change to show up live. It's actually a fine developer round trip, and we didn't have to replace the build system that this web framework ships with. If you're a Vue user, you keep using your same build system as before underneath Bazel. What's the advantage? Well, Bazel can give you a graph, a build graph. So like there's a library in here this library is compiled independently. And so you really do have a dependency graph. It's just less fine-grained than like many Bazel projects have a build file in every directory. This one just has a build file that follows the dependency graph that the Vue developers are used to, which is like they define a library. In this case, you run rollup to produce the result. It makes an npm package, and then this is the thing that you can depend on from the root of the dependency graph. And importantly, you can't tell from that spot whether it's first party or third party. So this npm package thing will create something that you link into your tree, and your dependency on it. If I go back to the root, the dependency is this one, your name / your library. It shows up in the same place that the third party dependencies do. And that's good because it means that you can move your code between being an external thing, like you have a mini repo to start with, and it's in some other repo and it's published to Artifactory, and you consume it just the same as it would be if it was third party. Now you bring that thing into your mono repo, you don't have to change all the usage sites. You just change where the code is, and you tell us to link against it locally rather than linking against something that we fetched remotely. I think there's probably one more thing I should show before I step off the stage. I didn't mention this part. So this is where we run the linker. So if you build this node modules target and then look in Bazel out, you will see the folder that looks like what a node program expects, which is like all the things that I depend on. Well, all the things I depend on. This is basically, there's a step of indirection here. So this is going to create a virtual store, which is pnpm's term for like lay out the tree in a fast way. But all of those things are symlinks into the individual dependencies. And so if you depend on node modules / Vue, let's say, that's what's going to actually cause it to get fetched. So all the fetches are deferred until later. And it's important to note, like, none of these load statements are going to cause any packages to get fetched either. So if I had some other target in this build file, like a Python target, and I only built that Python target, I would download 0 npm packages. So yeah, that's probably as much code as I have time for, and I'm speaking too quickly anyway. So back to Jason. Yeah. Any more questions I can answer?
You actually do have one more. So we're technically at time. Don't mind running a little bit over. Obviously, people can check the recording if we do. So Alex, unless you have to immediately bounce out in the next minute, we've got 2 questions here.
Yeah. Hey, Dan. So how does a developer know if they need the copy file rule? Like I mentioned, the one weird thing we do is that the sources have to be in the output tree so that Node can find everything. What we've done in all of there's basically some Starlark helpers that are underlying the Node.js binary and JS run binary rules, where we check all of the sources that you hand us, and if they come from the source tree, which is to say, the Bazel's Starlark helpers say like source file equals true, then we automatically create some extra actions to copy those things to the output tree and then refer to them based on their output tree locations. That works as long as that source file is in the same package with the rule that referenced it as a source. But of course, one of Bazel's rules that we can't work around is that if you're in a different package from a source file, you're not allowed to write to the output tree. Like you can't write to the output tree of some other package. So the answer to the question is you need to do your own copy file. If you have a source that points to some other package, then that package needs to be the one to copy that file to the output tree so that you can reference the output file. We did try to, I think we've added error messaging so that it's more obvious, like it tells you what copy file rule to add. I think we even print the bulldozer commands. So, as much as possible, like if you do trip over that, it should be short and painless.
Okay. 2 more.
Workspace colon. So that's a great question. So all the package managers at this point have a concept of workspace. And, unfortunately, Bazel has the same term workspace. But fortunately, you can just make them be one-to-one. So a Bazel workspace would have a pnpm workspace inside. The support that we have for the workspaces is pnpm specific. So if you're using a Yarn workspace, like I said, the best we can do to support Yarn and npm is to translate their lock files. I don't think the lock files for npm or Yarn are sufficient to tell us what the workspace layout is. So I don't think we can make those work, but I could be wrong. Might be worth us investigating. I'm sure Greg will correct me on Slack whether we already know that or not. Yeah, I would say like that's the mechanics. Like as an end user, when you're using npm workspaces or yarn workspaces, like all you need to know is that some of folders in my repo are their own separate npm packages, and that I can have a dependency graph between them, and that's still true. So from a user perspective, it works the way they expect.
Okay.
Container images, excellent. Wow, that's all the best questions.
This one particularly excites me because I spent the last 6 years on Kubernetes, so I got giddy when I saw this one come in.
So in 1.0, we do have, I'll show it real quick. I think it's even mentioned on the README. Okay, so building Docker containers. So this is basically the answer. It does work, but we didn't put it in the public API yet. So if you look at this example where it's working, there's a BZL file here that you would end up having to copy paste to your project. Like really, this should be part of the rule set. It's just that it has dependencies on rules Python that we would rather not have. And so it kind of expands the scope of the transitive dependencies that you would need in your workspace file. So yes, it works. It's not very ergonomic right now. There's kind of a lot of code here. And for 1.1, it's on our roadmap to make that more integrated and stitched right in. The other thing I should point out is it doesn't depend on rules Docker actually. Like all we need to do is make a couple of tar files, and then if you look in the build file, the result of this JS image layer thing just makes a tar, and then independently, like composition of unrelated things, you can use rules Docker to turn those things into container layers and then make a rules Docker container image. But the two things are totally orthogonal. There's nothing about rules.js that knows about rules Docker. Our job is just to make tar files.
Interesting. Greg did give you a follow-up for pnpm about the workspace colon. One more.
Linters, yeah. Every single npm package is compatible with the way that we're doing this. So yeah, and we have an example. I wonder if I can find it immediately. Examples. Do we have something that does lint? I don't think I can point to the example immediately. I do actually. This is maybe an interesting answer. So any tool can work, and Mocha is an example of a test runner. You can wrap it with a macro and then expose it as if it was a rule. So instead of building custom rules, it's much easier to write macros. And in my opinion, almost everybody should be writing macros in Bazel, and only a few people should have the terrible job of having to write custom rules. If you have a really good gen rule style thing that just give me an arbitrary tool, let me declare the environment and a bunch of other features, then you can write macros instead. And then the bar to entry is much lower for writing macros. So it makes it so more companies can get in on this.
All right. And lastly, I'm just going to end on an awesome compliment. Always love seeing this. With that, thank you to everyone. We'll start with thanking Alex because I approached him just last week about this. So I'm extremely happy that he was able to quickly put this together and come on and be so damn knowledgeable about it. Summer's hard, y'all. No one's around. So thank you, Alex. I really appreciate you coming on. I think based on the questions and the interest level, I think this was absolutely huge. This is one of my favorite ones we've done. Thank you to everyone for the questions. This is very much, I'm going to repeat this in an email too, but this is very much what I want out of these. So don't be afraid to propose topics or to ask questions. I like this format because people who wouldn't interrupt or ask a speaker at a conference or in some kind of workshop, much more inclined to just drop something on chat and let me handle the interruption and things like that. So as a format wise, I think this works really well. In terms of those examples, Alex, I'm going to send out an email either later on today or tomorrow with the link to this. I need to get more regular about it. A lot of the links we covered throughout the course of it. So that way, if you do find the examples you want, you can follow up with those. I tried to follow along, paste a lot of the blogs in there. And then you went to that Docker example when the URL was like that. I'm like, yeah, we're not typing that one. Alex can send that one later if we need to. So again, thank you for the community for coming and hanging out with us, being very interactive. I love that. I want to see more of it. Thank you again, Alex. I very much appreciate it. I'm sure we'll have you on again in the future after we give people some time to come up with new questions for you. I have been Jason. I keep forgetting to introduce myself at the start of this. It's a bit late now, but I'm a developer relations engineer at Google. So if this is your first time here, nice to meet you all. Hopefully I will see many of you at BazelCon. Keep an eye out for more announcements on that over the next couple weeks as I navigate the legal fun of the CFP. And with that, we're going to end it. So thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next month.